Hello, this video talks about technical writing and document design, the basic concepts of that. We're going to look at some of the basic terms and concepts behind technical writing and page design, and you should start observing all of the documents that I present to you and see if they are easy to read and easy to use, and they make you want to read them rather than not read them. We're also going to look at the difference between academic and technical writing, and we're going to talk about audience awareness and being reader-centered, which is what you want, rather than being writer-centered. And we'll talk about document design objectives, usability, and persuasiveness. I also strongly encourage you to look up these concepts in the 2 online technical writing books that I have linked for you. It will help your understanding greatly. The difference between technical writing and academic writing. The purpose of academic writing is usually just to show your teacher that you have mastered certain concepts in a document. Your audience is basically the teacher, whereas in technical writing, your purpose can be pretty varied. It can be to talk someone into doing something, persuade them. It can be to provide them information without giving opinion. It can be to give them progress reports, all kinds of different things. And those call for different types of documents, from letters to emails to memos to various kinds of reports. Layout, formatting, and graphics are way more important in technical writing than they are in academic writing. Layout is the placement of things on the page so that it is appealing, making it easy to read, usable. So you can see the layout of this slide. I have 2 columns. It would not have looked as good if I had put it all in one column. So 2 columns gives it kind of a balance and makes it a little bit easier to read. Formatting is whether you use bold, what white space you use, what type of font you use, whether you, whether you use serif versus a non-serif font. So formatting is anything you do to the things on the page. Layout is where you put the things on the page. And of course, graphics can greatly, you know yourself, can greatly help you understand a concept. If you've got a diagram, a chart, even a photo can help you see what something looks like. Academic writing more these days is collaborative, but workplace writing or technical writing is very often collaborative. A lot of times people in a committee will work on a document and have different roles in creating the document. There's also social and political factors in academic versus technical writing. If you're writing basically to the teacher and you're trying to show the teacher what or how you have mastered a certain understanding, then you don't really get involved with the politics that's going on in the department or any gossip that's going on in the department. It's generally just you and the teacher. You produce whatever the teacher is asking you to produce, and that's it. But in technical writing, there is a lot of social and political factors involved. You have to know the power of the person you're writing to. Can they fire you? Are they equal to you? You need to know who else will read this document, maybe now or in the future. You can never assume that only one person will read a document in technical writing. That would be a fatal mistake, and I can show you plenty of examples of that. So technical writing is very public writing. Each organization may have their own conventions for writing memos. One organization may want a very standardized memo heading that has their company logo, while another may not want memos at all. They may want just emails or something. So you have to look at the organizational conventions. Conventions are standards, or what that organization wants. Whereas in academic writing, it's generally, it's not that varied. You have MLA, you have APA, you have some others, plenty of others, but each department has a certain style of writing. I mean, history majors write a certain way, English majors write another way. So humanities tend to be similar. Science documents tend to be similar. So organizational conventions, and you have to go with what that organization wants. Deadlines in the academic setting are not that stringent. If you miss a deadline in college, not much is going to happen. You might be penalized a few points. Once in a while you'll find a professor that will not accept a late paper or something like that, but still nothing great is going to happen. Whereas in a technical writing setting, a business setting, you might find that missing a deadline would lose you your job, or take away your pay, or something a lot more serious, especially losing your job. Technology is different. We try to have the most up-to-date technology in the academic setting so that you can get used to it, whereas your business may not have the latest programs, or they may have very specialized programs that you have to learn. And then there are legal and ethical issues in academic writing. Whatever you write belongs to you. I cannot use your writing in any way unless you give me permission. But in a workplace setting, anything you write in the workplace belongs to the company. Now, there are often lawsuits about that. If it was created on a company computer, if it was created in company time, generally the courts will decide with the company. But if it's created outside the company, the creator may have more legal standing to own something. How does this document make you feel, this font? Do you want to read it? I don't. I would not want to read it. For one thing, it's very pale to me, and it just kind of blurs together as big blobs of print. So this is not usable, it's not persuasive, but this is what people often do. And if you're trying to get something across to someone, if you want them to fund your project, or you want them to give you the go-ahead on a project, do you really want to present this kind of your information in this way? This is not effective. It's not usable, and it's not persuasive. So font, layout, formatting, font needs to be darker. It is a non-serif font, but it's a rather large one like Arial. So I would make it more like Calibri, where it doesn't take so much of the line. And it needs to be darker. Darker is formatting. Also, this is a rather big paragraphs. In technical writing, we want short paragraphs. So I would divide each of these paragraphs into 2 paragraphs each, maybe 3 each. You do not want big paragraphs in technical writing, and you want to format it so that it's easy to read. Think constantly about your audience, where they're going to read the document, how they're going to read the document. Are they going to read in a hurry? Are they going to read right before they get it? Your document will have much better success if you make it usable and persuasive to the reader. Not to you, to the reader. Think about what your audience needs, wants, what will help them. Standards for usable documents. And you will need this information, so you may want to write it down or note it on the handout, printout that I gave you. The information should be easily located. So I've read your document, and I'm talking to somebody about it later, and I want to go back and find that information to show them. So if you use headings, subheadings, you should be able to locate that information easily. Information is easily and accurately understood. So you don't want to use legalese. You don't want to use passive. You want to use straightforward sentences, subject, verb, object, and you want to make your sentences varied, but not convoluted, where you have long, stringy sentences. You want to make your paragraphs shorter, so the information can be easily absorbed, easily understood, and accurately understood. Information should be able, the reader should be able to use the information with minimum effort. You know, if it's got like a 2-page report or 3-page report, I should be able to thumb through it and find the exact spot where I saw something and point it out to someone. You know, minimum effort. I shouldn't have to reread the document just to find a sentence that I wanted to talk about. Standards for persuasive documents. A persuasive document encourages the reader to actually read the document. Now you'll notice that I have a slide design here with a light green background. The edges are slightly darker, and that is rather appealing unless you are colorblind. If you're colorblind, it may appear some other color. I'm hoping this works for everyone. If it doesn't, then I have failed in communicating in one way, in communicating with my audience. So you have to encourage the reader to actually read the document, and how it looks, whether it's appealing or not, would be part of it. What if I had made this like lime green? I don't think that would be very appealing. I wouldn't want to read it. It would be hard on my eyes. Encourage the reader to consult the document later. And again, that comes with headings. It comes with bullets. That is encouraging. I can scan very easily. Leave the readers with a positive impression of the document, a positive impression of the writer, and a positive impression of the company. Those are very important. That's what makes a document persuasive. Notice also that when I do the bullets, I put them a little closer to the text than what is default. They're not touching the text, but by putting it closer, it looks a little more attractive. Notice also that I have parallel structure in my list. Encourage is a verb. It's an imperative form. Encourage, imperative form. And leave is a verb, imperative form. So if you have parallel structure in bulleted list, that makes it easier to read. And people notice that subconsciously and get a positive impression of the document. To create usable, persuasive documents, always define your purpose first. What is it that you want to accomplish with the document? And then define your audience and go back and forth. Refine the purpose, define the audience. Write down as much as possible about the audience as you can. Just from what you have seen of this course and heard from me so far, you are already defining me as your audience. You're listening to my tone of voice, you're looking at the documents I prepare, and you're getting an impression of who I am. You do the same thing with any other document that you're going to prepare. We're always assessing situations, and we're always assessing people that we deal with. So you do that just like you do in everyday life. You do that for your documents as well. Defining your communication purpose. Are you wanting them to take some kind of action, like sign up to vote? Are you wanting them to understand an idea or a process, like how to do something? Are you wanting them to change their thinking about something? Maybe you want them to purchase something over something else. To provide needed or requested information. Maybe they have requested more information on a certain topic, and your goal is to give them that information in easily read and digested format. Not to give them opinions, but just to give them the information so they can make up their own mind. Defining your audience. Your primary reader is the person that you're writing to. Usually it's one person. It could be a small group of people. Their name, what their title is, what role they play in the company. Are they your superior, your colleague? What kind of preferences do you know that they have? Now, I've already given you some of my preferences about font. I like Calibri, about 12 point. So you've heard that. You should make note of it. You already know that I wouldn't like to read something in lime green. So we listen to those things. Personality, you're already assessing that for me, and you would for any other document that you have. Past interactions that you've had with that audience. Have you had problems with that person in the past? Do you have cultural differences that you need to be aware of? For example, we had people who came into our department who lived all their lives in the northern states. And here in the southern states, we tend to start any conversation slowly, kind of do a little chit-chatting. And it was kind of a culture shock for that person, because those people, there's more than one, because they were used to getting right down to the point, not wasting time chit-chatting. And so we had to learn to get along and to understand that they weren't being rude and abrupt, and we weren't wasting time. So you need to understand that people have cultural differences, not just between countries or ethnic groups, but just between regions of the country. Who are your phantom readers? It's not just your primary reader that will read that you need to think about. Who might also read that at the current time and later and outside the organization. Current readers within and outside the organization and in the future. Documents are often kept on file. Who might be reading it next month, next year? Those are your phantom readers, and you need to try to think of who that might be. Who are your stakeholders? Those are people who would gain or lose as a result of your information. For example, you might be writing to someone to have them change a policy at your apartment building, a policy that would benefit you, but it might be detrimental to other people in the building. So those are your stakeholders. They didn't have a say-so in it if your primary reader follows your advice. So you need to kind of think about them and address their possible objections and reactions. Try to think of where your readers might be reading, the reading scenario. Would they be reading on a phone? Would they be reading the instructions under a car? Would they be in an office? Would it be windy? Would they possibly be colorblind, which is very, very, very possible. About 10% of the population are colorblind. One of my own sons included. And he could probably, he could see this slide, but he would not know it was light green. He'd probably think it was gray. All right, so think constantly about your audience. How does what you know about your audience affect your writing? All right, so you have figured out who your audience is, and you've written down as much as you can about their preferences and everything about them. So it's going to affect the type of document that you choose. Are you going to put it into a memo or an email? If it's within the organization, you'll choose a memo. If it's someone outside the organization, you'll choose a letter, a business letter, or an email. So that would also, the type of document would affect the formality. And if it's someone within the organization that you are very familiar with, you could be a little less formal, especially if they are on the same level as you. But if it's someone within the organization who is your superior, then you would want to always be a little more formal, even if you know that person fairly well. The type of document would also affect the layout and formatting. A memo looks a certain way, a letter looks a certain way, an email looks a certain way. Reports have their own structures. The type of document, your audience, all those, your audience is going to affect what you include and what you leave out. You would have to assess what your audience already knows about the topic, and probably leave that out. For example, if there's technical terms and they already know what those mean, you don't need to explain what those technical terms are. Or if you think they need a refresher, then you might want to go ahead and explain those. So what to include and what to leave out. What structure you use. If you're presenting some kind of negative information, then you may want to ease into your recommendation and start with on a more positive note. Generally, technical writing is more forthright. You start with what it is you're going to present, and then you present the argument for it. It just depends on the situation, the topic, the audience, and so forth. What visuals should you include? How many visuals you should include? Very often, you want as many visuals as will help your presentation of the information. Your word choices and phrasing. Do not try to use fancy words. Use the words you already have in your brain. If your vocabulary needs to be improved, then work on that. But don't try to use a word that you really don't understand, because you probably won't use it correctly. So it's entirely possible to create an effective document using just everyday language. Now, we don't use slang or cursing or anything like that, but we do try to create very clear subject, verb, object sentences. Also, who your audience is will affect your deadlines and other constraints. They may say, oh, get it to me by Thursday or Friday. Or you may have to get it there Thursday, 8 o'clock, because that person likes to read things in the morning. So who your audience is affects a lot about your writing. Reader-centered versus writer-centered. Showing respect is following the conventions and editing and using an appropriate tone. If you respect your reader, then you would follow the conventions for a letter. You wouldn't create your own letter format, your own letter structure. They wouldn't understand what you're doing. People expect a letter to look like a letter. They expect a memo to look like a memo. And they expect you to edit. If you don't edit, there's two things they can assume. You don't know how to edit, or you didn't want to edit. So which one would be acceptable? Neither one. And your tone is important. Now, sometimes people don't understand me, especially in this online format. I tend to be a little sarcastic, and I'm just joking around. I would never hurt your feelings intentionally. So anything I write, please read it with the understanding that I'm not being mean. Never would I be mean to you or try to insult you. It's very difficult to convey what's the word I want? A even tone and still be interesting to read. Some people can get my writing style and others can't. If you have a sense of humor, then I think you'll get my writing style. But I try to tone it down so that I don't offend anyone. But if you've read anything that I've written so far, you may understand that I insert a little humor every once in a while. Limiting the use of first person is something that you're going to want to do. First person singular is I. Like, I am writing, I believe, I think. Get rid of all those. You don't need those. Focusing on information the reader needs. That, again, it's not what you want, what you know, or what you want to write. It's what your reader needs to read. That's it. And providing information in the most logical order for the reader. What does the reader need to read first? What does the reader need to read second? And so on. You have to think about this. I do this when I write. And then helping the reader with visuals, so that when they read something, they can look at the visual and say, okay, I understand. So this is reader-centered versus writer-centered. We don't want to use I, very rarely. We want to show respect by using the conventions for the type of document. We want to give the reader with the information they need in the order they need it and give them visuals. That's reader-centered. And finally, I'm going to remind you multiple times in this course to think constantly about your audience. Who is your audience? What do you know about them? What does that mean for your writing? What document do you need to use? What do you need to include, exclude, and so forth? Think about your audience. And you have been doing this since you were a child. You would assess your parent, what mood they were in, their previous responses when you've asked them something. You were assessing your audience. You know, don't ask him now, he's tired. Or don't ask Mama that, ask Dad that. So you know how to do this. Now I want you to do it in your documents. Who is your audience? How does it affect what you write? That's it on this video.